The close relationship between government and environmental groups is not just a revolving door of insider deals. It's deception as to purpose. It's the invasion of private lives. It's the seizure of private property. The environmental group, governmental foundation axis will do anything to achieve its real goals. Take one Sierra Club attorney as he cynically explains how the government and his organization distorts law to achieve their real agenda, going so far as to fabricate an endangered species. Often government agency executives sit on the boards of environmental groups, move on to work for environmental groups, or were themselves environmental operatives at some time in their careers. Contrary to popular belief, big business is not the primary target of this environmental group, government, foundation coalition. Today, it's average Americans, small and medium-sized businesses, farmers and ranchers, homeowners, you, who are the target of these predatory actions.
This is a house I left when the revolution broke out and come to this country. It was in 1956.
John Pozgai is a mechanic who came to America in 1956, escaping the tyranny of the Soviet Army. He thought when he immigrated from Hungary, he had escaped the excesses of government. But when he saved up and bought a tract of land on which to build a small business, he found out that America was not the land of freedom he thought it was.
We never even knew what was going on originally. We had known that we bought a piece of property in '86. It was clean, light industrial property. It had no easements. It had no restrictions. I mean, we wouldn't buy it unless we were able to build on it. That was our initial thought, was we were going to put our truck repair business on this side of the street. So it was a dump yard. We had a lot of work, a lot of time invested. We cleaned it up. When it started to look good, we were ready to build. We went to the state. The state said, sure, you could build here. Just level it off, put some topsoil down, clean it up a little bit better. We did that. We had environmental impact studies saying that our streams were clean now. We could get started. Then all of a sudden the Army Corps came in.
By cleaning up the vacant lot, which was a dump site, then preparing it for his building, the U.S. government, through the Army Corps of Engineers, decided John Pozgai was violating wetlands environmental regulations. Though he had state and local approval, John Pozgai had become, in the federal government's mind, a criminal. The government hired his neighbors to spy on him, to photograph, and to video him.
See that air conditioning window? Well, that's where they had the television camera to monitor us in that top window hole.
They surveyed us for
They surveyed us.
a month. They watched our activities. They watched what we wore. They watched what we did.
And also they got paid well for it too.
Absolutely. They did their civic duty.
Yeah.
So they think.
They was come over here and they check our house, look everywhere, everything. And I asked them so many times, tell me what they want, what they looking for, because they check every door, everywhere, upstairs, downstairs, a cellar. And I says, how you tell me what you want, I give it to you. And they just laugh at me. They don't even treat us like a person. And it was very painful.
You invest your life savings into a piece of property, and then, you know, the government comes out and says, it's not your property. I mean, you can own it, you can pay taxes on it, but you can't do anything on it unless we say so. And you ask them why. Give me a logical explanation. Would you like to buy the land from us? You have every right, just like anybody else. Come on out here and give me a fair offer. No, we don't want to buy it, but we don't want you to use it, and we don't want you to have any value in it. I mean, how could you not fight that?
John Pozgai was tried in federal court. The jury, shown pictures of wetlands with ducks on it, were not allowed to see the actual property that had no wetlands on it. Nevertheless, John Pozgai was convicted. He was fined $200,000 and remanded to Allenville Federal Penitentiary to serve a 3-year sentence. Carl Eby, who worked closely with the Pozgai case and who worked for the Department of Agriculture for 30 years, had this to say about the government's actions.
From the evidence that I have seen, it appears likely that both the Corps of Engineers and EPA did not adequately investigate the soils, the hydrology, and the vegetation on this site, that they made their decision without adequate data. John, when he was represented in court, was not adequately represented, so that he didn't present the full evidence. His side didn't present the full evidence. But I think the regulators have a responsibility, that's the Corps and EPA, to seek the truth and to bring that out, not to go forward and deliberately try to catch a citizen violating the law, but to find out what the truth is. And I don't think that was done.
We've had expert after expert after expert come out and testify that we do not have these possible criteria to meet a wetlands, but currently there is no law, there's nothing but our word against the federal government. And when you get into a federal court, you're not going to win.
Though John Podsguy has paid fines, taxes, and even served his time in prison, he still can't use his property.
They believe the Constitution is an antiquated document and it's gone with the wind. And basically they have free reign. They can tell you what to do with your property, and you have to do it. If you won't do it, they'll come out and do it to you. And they will do it. I mean, this is living proof. They built us a 1-acre ditch. They put my father in jail, brought out contractors, dug a hole, put the dirt from here to there, and now they made the property useless for environmentalists, useless for us. And yet our neighbors over there are running a junkyard, same land, same elevation, same dirt. Where's the justification in that? This was the time when they were supposed to enjoy their life, or they were supposed to be able to retire, and now they can't. I mean, it's basically a catastrophe, and I don't think they can stop fighting, because, you know, this is a freedom fight, and I believe they'll win, but it's just too many years.
I hope one day they let us free. They give us back our land, that way we could do what we like to do, you know.
Unfortunately, the Podsguy case is not the exception. All too often we see case after case after case where you have the U.S. Attorney and the EPA going after the little guy, going after people like Old C. Mills in Florida, who put 19 loads of clean building sand on a quarter-acre lot, the kind of sand that my kid plays in the backyard. Not because there was any damage to the environment, because he dared defy the EPA and the Corps of Engineers and reasonably use their property. Not a single fish, bird, or sea lion was killed in the Podsguy case, the O.C. Mills case, the Bill Allen case. I can name you case after case after case. And yet the prosecutors want to get a quick indictment, want to get a quick conviction so they can say, look, we're going after so-called water polluters. That's nonsense.
John Podsguy was a sacrificial victim. He and many other average Americans are used by the environmental groups as the so-called proof that the system is working. In this manner, they can hide the true agenda of the environmental elite. And this agenda, the persecution of the little guy, the rights of private property being eaten upon, is not about the environment being saved. It's about the environment being stolen. It's being stolen by the very people who control government at its highest levels. In the early to mid-90s, the Nature Conservancy, the largest environmental group in the country, and backed by the Rockefeller Brothers Fund and a host of other large foundations of the financial elite, inspected 400 properties daily and was purchasing over 1,000 acres per day. Most properties are posted for quick sale back to the federal agencies at enormous profits. In fact, sales are often forced by getting a federal agency to threaten environmental action, forcing the owner to sell to the Nature Conservancy at a reduced value.
Why are they using the land management agencies such as the Forest Service, BLM, working in conjunction with the non-government organizations such as the National Wildlife Federation, Sierra Club, and Natural Resources Defense Council, to take private property without compensation? Why are they doing that? In other words, why do they want to nationalize these lands? I think to answer that question, you have to ask the question also, why have they wanted to nationalize lands in other nations? Whether that was in Germany in the 1920s and 30s, whether it was in communist China, whether it was in communist Russia. What is the reason for nationalizing land? In a free society, the individual is sovereign, the individual owns the land, and the government must pay attention to what the individual has to say. So really this attempt to nationalize land in this country, which has been going on for 100 years and is intensifying now, is nothing more than the age-old attempt, which has always been with us, of a few people attempting to control all the wealth and all the power to the exclusion of the masses.
Very powerful forces are at work behind this green curtain. A healthy environment is no longer at the heart of this issue. It's power, it's control.
Big money interests in foundations, very big money foundations, have essentially taken over the programs, the projects, the direction of the environmental movement, and are using it as a tool for their own purposes.
Ron Arnold has been studying this issue since the early 70s. In the book, Trashing the Economy, written with his associate Alan Gottlieb, the major environmental foundations and their contributors are detailed. Arnold tells us it's the foundations and large corporate empires that now drive the major groups in the environmental movement.
Their agenda is one of power and money. Power and money can get you anything you want. You will find that a lot of the money that goes into these environmental groups that you know by name, the Nature Conservancy is only one, the World Wildlife Fund, the Sierra Club. Many of these groups are getting stupendous amounts of money from big money foundations that have their own agendas for social change.
Consider the statement from a prominent National Wildlife Federation attorney as quoted in the Washington Post. Property rights do not include the right to squeeze every dollar of profit out of every square inch, only the right to a reasonable return. The Post then reports that private property owners' complaints about environmental laws are a cover for fat cats to radically reinterpret the Constitution. Imagine the already bloated government joining forces with the most powerful super lobby on Capitol Hill. Money magazine stated that in 1991, environmental groups took in $2.5 billion. As a movement, these groups are like no other in number of laws they have written, number of court cases they have won, and number of regulations they have imposed. They are private, and yet their activities shape broad public policy. Many are closely connected to the most powerful corporations in the world and America's most elite family foundations. And most are subsidized by exemption from income tax obligations. They are the only important power center in American life not controlled by an internal canon of ethics or by government regulation.
The people who are driving it most to make things tough on the average person are the Rockefeller Family Fund, the Pew Charitable Trusts, the W. Alton Jones Foundation, the MacArthur Foundation, the Bullitt Foundation, names that perhaps the average American has never heard of. Some of them are quite famous. But there's a huge amount of money in each one of those foundations, and they use it very deliberately, targeted to specific programs to stop the use of resources here, to stop the use of private property there. It all adds up to a virtually dictatorial grip on your personal rights.
The Rockefellers, who chartered one of the oldest private foundations in the U.S., saw its birth from the Standard Oil Trust, one of the most monopolistic, anti-union, anti-free enterprise companies in the history of the country, and certainly very generous. But the Rockefeller generosity is not so charitable as it may seem in all cases. John D. Rockefeller coveted the Jackson Hole area at the turn of the century. Since he didn't want the locals to know what he was doing, he went on a program of buying up the area through shell corporations. He then donated the land to the federal government for a park, but he managed to grab the concessions for hotels and amusements. He also owned property near the area. Its value soared. The success of this operation was recreated in colonial Williamsburg, where the Rockefellers controlled the 6 hotels in the park. This pattern of donating certain areas was reproduced all over the country. That, in one simple methodology, is one way these foundations and financial backers work today. It's just business.
You'll find that the environmental movement is funded by big money interests, international interests, whose primary goal is the ultimate control of all the world's wealth in the hands of a very few.